Mr. McClintock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Elmendorf, Dr. Elmendorf, let's get to some basics here first. In order to pay for spending, we either tax it now or we borrow it now and tax it later. Are there any other ways of spending, other than monetary policy, which is itself simply a tax on existing capital?
Well, the amount by which you raise taxes later depends on the level of debt that you are willing to support
but you
in the
either
country.
borrow it or you tax it if you're going to spend it.
Yes, Congressman.
All right. So government really cannot inject a dollar into the economy that it's not first taken out of the same economy, either by taxing now or borrowing now and taxing to repay it in the future.
I think, Congressman, that under our current economic conditions, if the government borrows money, it is not taking a dollar out that would otherwise be invested. It can, in fact, increase the total demand for goods and services in the economy and thereby boost employment.
If the dollar is being borrowed by the government, presumably it is not there then to be borrowed by a consumer seeking to make consumer purchases, or a home buyer seeking to re-enter the housing market, or a small business seeking to expand jobs.
So I think that logic is exactly right, Congressman, at a point where the economy is at full employment, but that's not the current economic circumstances.
Now, would you explain the economic impact of debt?
So in a fully employed economy of the sort that we project for the second half of the coming decade, then higher debt, as I mentioned, crowds out private investment and reduces incomes relative to what they would otherwise be. In an economy like one we have today, the effects are starkly different. In an economy like one we have today, we think that additional borrowing to support higher spending or tax cuts would provide a boost to the economy in the short term. Certainly, if that extra borrowing is not paid down later, it will weigh on the economy later, but in the short term it will provide a boost to the economy.
But you're borrowing a dollar from the same capital market that would otherwise be funding loans to consumers or to businesses or to home buyers, for example. So it's the same dollar. The only question is whether it is borrowed by the government to spend or is borrowed by somebody in the productive sector to spend.
But under current conditions, Congressman, the demand for private borrowing is very low. There isn't a conflict in the credit markets. That's why the federal government's interest rates are so low right now. Under other conditions, there would be more of a competition for funds of the sort you're describing, but these conditions are unusual.
I would suggest you talk to some small business people who are desperately trying to get loans, or home buyers who are desperately trying to get loans, and they're telling us they can't get them. Now, tell us about the economic impact of spending, or pardon me, of taxes, rather.
So taxes can have two kinds of effects. One is they just take money that households would otherwise have to spend. The other is they can affect the incentives for people to work and to save. And in our macroeconomic modeling, we try to capture both of those sorts of effects.
In fact, didn't your office estimate that the tax increases back to the Clinton-era rates on those earning $200,000 as individuals, $250,000 as couples, would cost about 200,000 jobs?
That sounds roughly right, Congressman. I don't remember the specifics. You're referring to a report, I think, on the fiscal cliff from last fall. I don't remember the precise numbers.
Now, we're also told by your office that the sequester reductions in spending would affect about 0.6% of growth. You said about 750,000 jobs, because government would not be spending that money on creating government jobs. But as we've just established, government doesn't inject a dollar into the economy that's not first taken out of the economy. So I'm afraid we're getting to a situation where we're being told that tax increases are bad for the economy, too much borrowing's bad for the economy, particularly in the future that you're projecting, and spending cuts are bad for the economy, and that doesn't leave us with many options.
So, Congressman, I think the effects of fiscal policy on the economy are different under different economic circumstances. That is a widely held, not universally held, but a widely held view among economists, and that's the perspective that we take. So under current economic circumstances, when private demand for goods and services is low, additional government demand through higher spending or the government spurring additional private demand through lower taxes can both increase the overall demand for goods and services and thus encourage businesses to hire more. Under different economic circumstances of the sort that we usually have in this country and that we expect we will have again 5 and 10 years from now, then there is more. Then this competition you're describing between the government's use of funds and the private sector's use of funds can become acute, and that's why under those economic circumstances, smaller government deficits are good for the economy.
Thank you.